Welcome back to Growth Lab Sessions. I'm Joao, CEO of Stealth White Label Agency. Today we're exploring creative engineering and how to make those creatives profitable for e-commerce brands. And our guest today is Felix Dragoi. He runs an e-commerce agency and he is known for being able to structure creatives and make them profitable. So if you want to understand how creatives are playing such a huge role in driving conversions for e-commerce brands, make sure that you tune into this class, watch it until the end, and you will for sure leave with so much knowledge and a higher ability to make your creatives convert for your ad campaign. Felix, welcome to Growth Lab Sessions. Are you ready to take it to the lab?
Fully ready.
Fully ready, awesome. Well, so it's your second time around in Growth Lab Sessions, and now in season 2, where we have changed the model a little bit from a chit chat to more of a class. And to remind everyone, this is going to be class number 1 of this 3-part class series with Felix Dragoi. And we're going to be talking about paid media, creative engineering, and scalable e-commerce growth, something that Felix dominates, and he can teach you guys a lot about that. And so in class number 1, we're going to cover high conversion creative engineering. And I'm just going to do the same things as the previous class, where the guest, Felix, in this case, is going to present his screen and teach you guys everything about this class. So without further ado, let's go into it. Felix, when you analyze ads that create scale in e-commerce, right? What patterns do you usually see in the messaging or the structure or the creative approach that make them convert consistently?
Loaded question, right? Because there are so many variables.
Right.
But honestly, it's definitely having the right messaging. And what does that mean, right? It's very broad. But the right messaging basically means being very specific, meaning that you do need to be specific about the problem that you're solving and for the person that you're solving, meaning that are you solving someone's insecurity, right? Are you solving someone's marriage, right? Very possible with many products. And you also need to find those people where they are at that point, right? That you totally talk differently with someone who's like 20 versus 30 versus 50, because they just think different of life, right? And that's why you have some catchphrases, just do it, right? That just apply to everyone, right? It's like so few words with such a high impact. But in e-com, you just have to find the right messaging for the right people, and we'll dive in and look at how to think about it. But there are definitely so many ways to go about it. And just like with investing, right? If you want to invest in stocks, it's usually the S&P 500 stocks. And to some extent, it's the same here with creatives. You can't just have one ad that does everything, but you need to have multiple ones, because you do need to talk with multiple people, especially if you want to scale.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a broad question, so we get a broad answer.
Yeah.
Now, there's many aspects in which you talked about that we can break it down into methods and structures, right? And so, like, to answer that question, it's like super possible that we can break it down to help the audience be able to think about like what is the patterns, messaging structure, and creative approach that they can run on paid ads to generate conversions. And so I have a next question here. Before we move on, is there anything that you want to add?
The main thing is that
if you're an agency owner looking to scale, you definitely want to explore our solutions at Stealth White Label Agency. With 14 years of experience and over 120 niches, we've been helping agency owners not only fulfill for their clients, but also acquire new clients so you can only focus on scale for your agency. If you're interested, definitely DM me, Joao, on my Instagram, or comment below and somebody's gonna reach back to you. Back to the podcast.
Creative is the biggest lever in general,
Yeah.
just because Meta is one of the biggest companies in the world, and it's mostly due to people advertising, having ads there. So that's everyone's biggest chance to make money nowadays. That's why we have so many millionaires that are 18 years old, right? Probably even younger, or 20 years old. Like, we didn't have this opportunity 15 years ago, or to some extent it just started at that point. So it's definitely a huge opportunity. And what is Meta mostly, right? It's Facebook, Instagram, and both of them are visual platforms. So creatives are definitely one of the most important things. And then we can talk about images, videos, right? And go into specifics. But that's why creatives are so important nowadays for any business
Yeah,
out there.
for sure. So many businesses. Like, I have a business that's a publishing business, right? So we run traffic to websites, to blogs, and then generate revenue. And then when generate revenue in those blogs via displaying ads for readers. And the messaging of the creatives changes all of the metrics for us to like sell ads inside of our websites, right? And so when we run a creative with a higher promise, that's when we get readers that have a really high intent on solving either their problem, right? Or getting their desires met, right? So I always think about creatives in terms of pain and desire. And then I break it down in the ad. And when we have a weak offer, right, or a weak like CTA, or we don't have that messaging that really hits the nerve in the other side of the screen, where the person is like, oh my God, he's talking to me, you know, that's when like the whole flow changes. Now, many founders still believe that media buying tactics are the main growth lever, right? And so we're talking about media buying tactics like that goes beyond creatives, right? So like
Yeah.
campaign strategies, things like that. But more and more, it seems creative is becoming like the real target layer, right? So like you're segmenting by the creative, you're not segmenting by the interest within like the campaign. Now, like everybody knows that. Everybody knows at this point that creative is like the real beast, right? Now, how should brands think about building a repeatable creative system instead of relying on occasional winning ads?
So this is where there's a need for a system, right? Because to some extent, ads are an art and a science, meaning that the art side is the designer, the creative strategist, right? Which want more freedom in most cases. And then you have the logic, the media buying, and that's the science, basically. Like, what do the numbers say, right? Like, it's another vibe there. It's what actually shows in the numbers, because numbers don't lie, right? You can lie with statistics, but if you look at the profit, for example, that does tell you the story. So what you need is definitely like a repeatable process. And anyone and everyone should have their own process. It doesn't have to be one specific one, right? That's why you'll have different guests here mentioning probably different things, and showing different tools, because the tools will change and all of that. But personally, what I like to think of most is what's the higher level strategy, right? And what over time won't really change, right? And it is the human psychology. So that's why it's ideal to think of, like you said, problem, solution, and then try to sprinkle in other things that make sense there, such as social proof, testimonials, all of that, right? Uh, so yeah, I can even share my screen whenever you'd want, and I can show like how I'm thinking of it. And these are just some variables, not all of them. This is exactly what I had here. It's a pretty short mirror board here, not very detailed, but this is exactly what you said, that media buying to some extent is kind of dead when it comes to audiences, targeting, bidding, placements, right? The AI can just do it much better, and it can do it for a long time. It wasn't even called AI, right, when Meta could do this. But now it is mostly the creative that does the targeting. If you have a creative with a mom, it will most likely go to a mom, right? You can actually see this after you check the data and so on. So I would say this is super important to remember. And when it comes to creatives, right, how to create them, how to create great assets, ads, and so on, right? Usually, I try to think, as I said, at a higher level, meaning that what are actually creatives? If you were to distill them down, right, on platforms like Meta, Google, whichever you want, it's usually images and videos. The thing is that each has its own upsides and downsides. With images, they are easier and faster to create, while videos are harder and usually slower, right? At least until AI came, right? Now they are definitely closer, but it's still not there, meaning that in most cases you still need to work with a creator. And the thing is that you also get some of their credibility. So that also helps. Um, and the thing is that images will give you more volume, but less scale. That's the downside. You will be able to test the messaging and, let's say, each angle, each persona. You can test a lot, but that's the thing that we need to remember, that images have their value when it comes to testing, while videos are way better when it comes to more scale, just because they are harder to actually create um, in general. That's why most people will go for statics, because you can do so many that eventually you'll get some that are good. But with video, because it requires more resources, not everyone will actually do it. And I can get into images so you can see how I think of them. And you can definitely go way more complex with this, but this is where you see the complexity to some extent. Because when it comes to images, to creative images, let's say you have a product, or maybe two, just two products, right, on your store. The thing is that each one solves at least one problem, or should at least solve a problem. If not, probably you won't really have success with it. And in most cases, it will solve multiple problems. Like I was saying earlier, it might be just the status, it might be the acne that you have, right?
Yeah,
So
so you
some
definitely want to pick like for one product, like one product will solve more than one problem, right?
Yeah.
But the ad that you want to run, you want to focus on like different problems, is what you're saying, right? So you have product A, and then for product A, you're going to have problem 1 and 2 that it's going to solve. And that's going to be your creative. Let's go back a step. Like, so you're talking about image creatives, and then you have product
Yeah.
1 and product 2. What comes after that?
So basically, you can have a different sequence here, but in most cases, I would try to ask this question: what is the problem that we're actually solving here? And then find out if it's a big problem or not. Because
Okay.
as we know, there are a few that which are really huge, right? Like
So
weight
let's
loss.
pick a product to make it like relatable. So product
Yeah.
1, what is it?
Let's say some kind of GLP, right? It's the craze right now. So
GLP.
yeah, something like
What is that?
Ozempic. The
Ozempic. Okay.
Yeah,
So
the one.
Ozempic, right? It helps you get skinnier.
Yep, yep.
And what else?
Uh, so that's the main
Look
thing,
better.
and yeah, and make more
Be
money
more
probably.
attractive.
Honestly,
Huh?
yeah, yeah, and make more money. Honestly, you'll probably make more money if you're more confident in yourself.
Okay. So it gives you confidence. So by default, you make more money. And then it
Yeah,
makes you skinnier, right? It makes you
yeah.
more attractive. So it boosts your confidence and it helps you lose weight. Okay. So where do we go from there?
Then I would think of the persona, meaning that
Okay.
who is that person that you're actually speaking with? Because you'll have here a mom, maybe a single mom, doesn't matter. We'll just say mom so we don't get way too specific here. Otherwise, we could create infinite possibilities. But I would say a mom with children that is just too busy. So that's her issue. And that's why she doesn't have time for the gym, for example. And another persona might be the guy who is just a workaholic. And unfortunately, he can't really go to the gym anymore. So he has to sacrifice something, like actually being in shape, for making money. So
Yeah.
these are two personas that you would have here. And these are just two, right? You could go into way more different directions here.
Yeah, so which is a good question, right? Because I think by this point everybody's following along in terms of like, okay, I want to create some image creative ads. This is the product one that I have. This is my two problems that we talked about. And now this is the persona that fits into those problems, right? So like the entrepreneur that wants to lose weight doesn't have time. And so we define like two different personas. Cool. And then what's the next step there? And by the way, sorry. And by the way, now that we define like a different persona and a different problem, what Felix is saying that we can define a lot more problems and create personas from those problems, right? So we can think about another problem that Ozempic solves, right? Get creative, put it in GPT, right? Like, and then come up with different problems. And then based on those problems, come up with a persona for each one of them. And now that's really interesting because Felix, you're saying we can create many more, right? Now,
Yeah.
how do you think about creating many more? Like, is it a question of budget that somebody has? Like, how do they think about that?
Yeah, finding them nowadays is super easy, I would say, because you have ChatGPT, meaning that you can just ask ChatGPT what
Yeah.
would be the personas that are most likely to buy this product, do some research and so on. And honestly, ChatGPT is not even the best. Probably you should be using Claude. And that's where you find different personas. And it would be ideal to also score them. I mean, we won't go into that much detail right now, but you can also ask for more details in terms of scoring them. And by score, I mean how big is the pain point and how much they are willing to spend or how many resources they have. Because usually, if someone is older, they do have more disposable income. That's why CPMs are higher for those older audiences, just because they are older with more disposable income, right? You do get more time to accumulate. And basically, that's one way I would try to actually find the personas. If you don't know them already, you can also send post purchase surveys already if you have a brand, right? Like there are
Yeah.
many ways to go about it.
Yeah.
Um, but
So
with
I
scoring,
like that you have the angle right next to it. Let's go into angle.
sure. So then you have to think of like how will you actually speak to them, right? Like through which angle you'll try to come to them, meaning that you wouldn't try to tell them you're fat, right? We would get canceled for that. um, so we would try to find different angles, such as um, by looking at the problem we can think, all right, so they're not feeling in shape anymore, they might be tired because of that, and because of that, because they're tired, they can't really take care of their kids as they would want, they can't enjoy the time with the kids as much, right? So basically the angle would be um, actually trying to come from that perspective of not being able to have a good life with their kids, not spend enough time. um, so that's one thing you could think of, and there are way many others. You could even think of, yeah, not having energy to actually have a good marriage. So this is where I would try to come from different angles and try to find what would be like the sub consequence of the problem. That's what I would say is happening here.
Mm. Okay, so that's awesome. I love that way of thinking about it. It's actually giving me a lot of ideas for the ads that I run.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is that when you find that, let's say, sub consequence, right, the fact that they can't really spend time with their kids, then you would go into messaging, because it's clear that you don't want to rely just on one. You don't want to try to have the next just do it as Nike, right? Ideally, you do test more. Here, I just have one, so I don't occupy too much space here on the mural board. And there wouldn't be enough space, honestly, if you would try to have, and this is what you should do actually, at least try 3 types of messaging, meaning that you could try something like tired of not being able to spend time with your kids, something like that, or tired of not, I'm trying to think what would be, maybe you have better ideas here of hooks, of
Messaging for
headlines.
what?
Basically, we're
Headlines for
trying to
what?
find headlines for the problem that we're solving and the sub consequence, meaning that, for example, the moms who can't spend time with their kids and in a good mood, right? So they are irritated because yeah, we know that having additional weight just creates more problems, also
Mm,
hormonal ones.
yeah.
So this is where you can just like test out multiple headlines, and this is where a lot of work takes place, because
Yeah. You know,
ChatGPT Claude
sorry.
won't give you the best ones.
You don't think so?
Unfortunately, it doesn't give you, especially if it's not well trained. And even
Yeah.
then, even if it's well trained, it has to be well trained on your brand voice, because otherwise it just will feel, this is if you have a brand, of course. Um, it needs to match that, the
Right.
brand voice.
Yeah, and that's something like that a lot of people don't understand about branding, especially like earlier, like more junior media buyers, is that the branding has to be cohesive, right? So you can't just like come up with some messaging off your ass. Like your messaging has to be cohesive with like the website content, with everything that the user is going to see throughout their buying journey. And so when you're training, and this is just like a parenthesis here, when you're training a model like Claude, for example, right, is what you use on a particular brand, you should really have inputs of like the website, emails, copywriting, styles, things like that. And then I would say that, you know, for me, I adopt a copywriting strategy technique based on a copywriter that I really like. And so, for example, I love Eugene Schwartz, right? I read his book, Breakthrough Advertising, and I always go back to his book and read it over and over again. And so my motto is trained on him, you know? And so because my motto is trained on him, and I've done a lot of like refining the messaging to train my like my model on writing for my ads, it always gives me great messaging. And so for example, when I'm thinking about messaging, so if I put this, if I take a screenshot, and this is something that's very practical for people watching, I'll take a screenshot after Felix zooms out, because you can't see the screenshot right now. You got to stay in this class for a little bit more. Don't reveal it, Felix, because there's a lot more to come. Now, you're going to put this screenshot after you understand this concept, and that's why you want to be paying attention in this class. After you understand this concept, so then all of these problems, persona, angles, messaging is going to be created for you, and then you can even ask it to rank it and score it, which is something that Felix was going a little bit into, but didn't, just for the sake of the time of his class and his precious time. He's an agency owner that runs a very successful e-commerce agency. And so when you do that, it's gonna do all of that for you in a fast way. And now the real importance of doing this work right now and not going to GPT and half-assing the messaging and the strategy is because this is the work that really matters, okay? Breaking down a problem, breaking down a persona, the angle, the messaging, and various other elements is how you collect 1% here, 2% there, 4% here. And as a whole, that's what's going to give you conversions in your ads. So really stay along. And now after we define the messaging, right, that you talked briefly about, Felix, like we're obviously not going to come up with like the best ideas right now on the spot. Now, where do people go from there?
So this is when things actually need to become reality, meaning that you'll do actually need to decide on the style, on the color of the image. So this is almost entirely on the designer. So this is where the designer actually should come into the next step. And either, and I think this is the cheat code nowadays, look at competitors and try to get their style, let's say, especially that works, right? Like this is a hack just to accelerate, right? Because you do need hacks along the way. And when it comes to style and colors, honestly, I'm not the creative strategist, right? I'm not a designer, so I wouldn't be the best at this. But you do need to put all of this right into a package. So basically, the style, the colors, the image. Nowadays, you can even generate the image, right? It's much easier than before. But this is where you have to take into account the brand guidelines and actually, let's say, steal from bigger brands. Ideally, you do take their learnings and ad spend, right? Probably millions of ad spend, and try to use it as much as possible for your brand. But of course, you can't copy it one to one, right? So this is where you actually need to use design, color, and make it yours. Make the actual creative yours for your brand.
Wow, cool.
And I would say there's one more, and honestly, we could probably even add more here, but I'm trying to keep it as high level as possible because one other aspect would actually be awareness level. I mean, this is where we get a little bit more advanced, but the messaging does have to be different for someone who is like unaware versus someone who is like actually product aware, meaning that someone who is product aware, you just need to show them the product. But for someone who is unaware, you wouldn't show them the product because why would they care? And that is where the most opportunity is, when someone is unaware actually of their problem. And this is where you would use a headline such as 5 signs that you're tired, or something that's very broad, something that would speak to so many people, such as, do you want more energy? Like most people will probably say yes to that. However, that ad probably doesn't solve it for as many, right? So that's why you should be more specific. But the best thing would be to actually start with people who are aware of the problem because they know they have the problem. You don't have to convince them too much, and they will buy faster. So that's why it's better to sell to people who know they have a problem and that have money. And usually it's the 45 plus range many times. But then over time, if you want to grow to 8, 9, 10 figures, then you do need to talk to more people. And the only way to do that is to actually change your messaging just so it's very broad, right? And we've mentioned so many times the Nike catchphrase here, just do it. But that's super broad, right? Because eventually they did have to go there.
Yeah. And so, right. Now let's zoom out so people can actually take this moment to take a screenshot, including myself, of this image, because I think that's something that's super valuable as like a framework that is super practical, right? By you watching this class, you're getting many ideas of how to put together your creatives and test different creatives. Now, Felix, I do want to summarize one very important point that you mentioned, okay? And that is, if you want to increase the amount of reach and the sales and the volume of ad spend that you're going to be putting into your campaigns, you need to go in the awareness level that's non-aware, because that's the top of the funnel. And so in the top of the funnel is where you're going to get the lowest CPMs, the lowest CPAs, the lowest CPLs, however, the worst quality leads, okay? Now, that's your job as a marketer, right? is to get these like low aware leads that are not ready to buy, bring them to like more ready to buy stages by, adding information, adding value, making them understand the benefits, the pain points. And then you can bring them down to the bottom of the funnel where they convert through different strategies. Okay. And that's the only way I know where you're going to be able to scale campaigns. All right. So we're scaling campaigns to like $100, $200, and $300,000. And so that's from my experience of increasing budgets, is that if you don't increase the amount of personas, the amount of angles, the amount of messaging, style colors, okay, right? But the amount of awareness level within all of those variables, like you can't scale, because you can only buy so many people that are ready to buy your whatever product that everyone else is bidding in the ad auction. Okay. So for you to win the ad auction, you got to explore different audiences by creating so many different versions of your creatives to sell your product. And if you want to scale further, you also have to tap into different funnel stages. And now Felix just drew for us. He's part artist at night. And when he's not media buying, he's drawing funnels. Now you can see that a funnel starts big at the top, and that's because there's more people there, right? And then it funnels into the middle of the funnel, which is smaller, MOF, and then BOF is bottom of the funnel. So if you're only creating conversion campaigns to buy, to purchase, and you only have one angle, one creative, or a few creatives with the same angles and the same audience, that's why your CPA is increasing, right? Felix, did I say anything crazy right now?
Couldn't say it better. And over time, that's the secret to grow. You just need to talk with more people, so you need more ads.
Here's the deal. That was class number 1, and now we're going to go into class number 2. Okay, so class number 2 might already be out, so check the channel for the playlist or the class number 2. It's going to say in the title of the video. If you're just seeing this video now and there's no other class 2, that's because it's been only a week that we've released this video, and class 2 is coming out next week. Okay. Now, thank you for watching Growth Lab Sessions Season 2, where we have very practical steps for you to increase your, agency skills, revenue, operations, media buying. And I'll see you guys soon.